Sydney Opera House. The Sydney Opera House is one of the most famous and distinctive buildings of the 20th century. The idea for it emerged in the 1940s, the prime movers being the English composer Sir Eugene Goossens, then working in Sydney, and New South Wales Premier Joseph Cahill. An international competition was announced in 1956 for a national opera house to be built at Bennelong Point on Sydney Harbour, close to the famous Sydney Harbour Bridge. In January 1957, little-known Danish architect 38-year-old Johan Utzon was declared the winner. It is said that one of the judges, leading architect Eero Saarinen, who had missed the beginning of the process and was underwhelmed by the shortlist, convinced the other members of the panel to go back to Utzon's design, which he thought was easily the best. It was the only design to allow the building to be viewed from every angle. Utzon's now famous design, consisting of a number of sail-like shell structures, was a departure from the modernism that had dominated mid-20th century architecture. It was more sculptural and expressionistic, and definitely unconventional for its time. Construction began in March 1959, with Ove Arup and partners on board as engineers. Joseph Cahill had been keen to get things moving quickly, and this created problems. First, the ground conditions had been inadequately investigated. Massive concrete foundations were needed, which added to the cost. The design of the shells had not been completed, and it was still not known how heavy they would be. The supporting columns would have to be rebuilt to accommodate the eventual design. Sadly, Joseph Cahill died in 1959, but the decision to press ahead quickly had given the project an unstoppable momentum. The biggest problem proved to be the design of the shells. Utzon had only produced sketch designs. Computer-aided design, which is essential to designing complicated structures today, was very much in its infancy, though the techniques developed for the opera house have formed the basis for more modern applications. Between 1958 and 1963, the design team tried 12 different solutions involving parabolas, circular ribs and ellipsoids before it was realised that they could all be built as sections of a sphere. It is disputed who realised this first, Utzon or Arups, but it had huge advantages in terms of simplicity and ease of repetition. The design of the roof was tested on scale models of the building in wind tunnels at the University of Southampton. The roof was constructed of 2,400 precast concrete ribs and 4,000 roof panels, all constructed on site and prefabricated on the ground before being lifted into place. The design of the roof tiles took 3 years of development to get the effect Utzon wanted. They were 120 millimeters square, made from clay with some crushed stone added, and manufactured by a Swedish company. Utzon moved his entire office to Sydney in 1963 to begin work on the interior. Ove Arup was now stepping back from the project prior to retirement, and relations between Utzon and Arup's partner in Sydney deteriorated. There was a change in the state government in 1965, with the new government promising to control costs on the building. Utzon was uncompromising in pushing through his vision, and these factors conspired to bring about his resignation in 1966. He left Sydney, and though he did some further work much later in the project, he was never to see the completed building. A campaign for his reinstatement was to no avail. The architect appointed to take his place was Peter Hall, a 35-year-old Australian. He only accepted the job after it was clear that Utzon would not be returning. Ove Arup had to think long and hard about whether he should resign too, but decided not to, a decision that would sour the friendship between him and Utzon. Hall thought that he would just be following Utzon's plans, but found that there was nothing but sketch schemes. The construction of the shells was completed in 1967, and work on the interior by Hall could now begin. Significant changes were required to the interior of the building. Among them, the major hall was redesigned to increase the capacity, but it was no longer able to stage operas. The minor hall became used for opera and ballet, but is not able to stage larger works. This became known as the Joan Sutherland Hall. The Opera House was formally completed in 1973 at a cost of $102 million compared to a budget of $7 million, and 10 years late. In the late 1990s there was a reconciliation with Utzon, who became involved in plans for changes to the building. He redesigned one of the smaller halls, now called the Utzon Room. However, he died in 2008. He had received the Pritzker Prize, architecture's highest honour, in 2003. The building contains the main concert hall with 2,679 seats, the Joan Sutherland Theatre with 1,507 seats, and 4 other smaller venues, as well as an outdoor forecourt. Looking at the building from the water, the concert hall is under the right-hand set of shells, and the Joan Sutherland Theatre is under the left-hand set. The smaller venues are in the podium. The construction of the Opera House was something of an opera itself, and it is the subject of an opera called The Eighth Wonder by Alan John and Dennis Watkins, presumably referring to the fact that it just failed to be added to the list of the new 7 wonders of the world. Nevertheless, it is one of the great buildings of the world and a source of great pride to Australians. It has been used for all manner of events and performances. It became a World Heritage Site in 2007 and is visited by 10.9 million people a year. When awarding Utzon the Pritzker Prize, Frank Gehry said, "Utzon made a building well ahead of its time, far ahead of available technology, a building that changed the image of an entire country."